Alright, so what happened? How did you come back?
So, basically, my family, we didn't go to church every single week, not even very often throughout the year. But we went, like, I think most families in America once or twice a year. But despite that, my mom every night she would lead us in a prayer before we go to sleep. The common prayer to recognize we down to sleep.
You know all your brothers and sisters?
So what?
You know all your brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
How many got?
I have 2 younger brothers and 1 sister. Older sister. And so she basically instilled in me a sense of connection to the Creator, even though I didn't go to church enough to really get deep into Christian theology. But basically, so even though we weren't like really serious Christians,
Alright, shut your mouth!
my mom would always sit us in front of TV and we would watch like news shows or science shows. We didn't watch nonsense. We watched investigative reporting and whatnot. And she especially liked religious shows. she especially liked the religious shows. Not from the Christians, but from like the archaeologists and reporters that would report on things connected to biblical history. So I got interested in like biblical history and so I would look up stuff related to this on the internet. And basically I became very convinced of this. Not from preachers, but from secular type studies. So the more I looked into it, the more convinced I got.
Of what?
Of the historical credence of the Bible, the historical authenticity of the Bible. But because I come from a Christian environment, for me this goes along with the New Testament. So what happened was I basically became a more and more serious Christian. But long story short, I started noticing that many things in the New Testament, it originally started with the New Testament, many things in the New Testament are contrary to what standard Christianity teaches. 2 outstanding examples in the book of Acts. This is the 5th book of the New Testament. In 2 different occasions with 2 different people, it reports that the Pharisees were interrogating certain Christian individuals. They didn't call themselves Christians yet. And they were accusing them of having abandoned the Torah and teaching contrary to the customs of the Jews. So in the first instance, it's a man, if I'm not mistaken, is Stephen, is his name. And he says that these reports are false. Basically, he denies them. So with this first instance, you either have to say that Stephen's a liar, and that's not a great example of a good Christian, even though the New Testament makes him out to be good, or you have to say that really it was a misconception or a rumor going on about the early Christians. Could be that there were multiple groups of Christians. And
What were they accusing them
of teaching Jews to abandon the Torah of Moses, the law of Moses.
What in particular what?
Or circumcision, or
Do they teach that you could, at that time, you don't have to keep circumcision?
The only thing that's explicit in the New Testament is that Paul talked against the requirement of circumcision for non-Jews who want to have a place in the world to come.
Non-Jews?
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. I'm very confused.
Non-Jews. That's the same as what Orthodox Judaism teaches
But
today.
isn't that what they consider themselves to be, like the new Jews?
That's the later understanding.
So if they consider themselves the new Jews, then it means that they don't expect Jews to keep circumcision.
That's the later understanding of Christianity.
But at that time,
Yeah.
if you're Jewish, and Paul's hanging out with
Right.
you, and he says, okay, he says, Paul, I think you're it. I'm going with you.
Okay.
He would probably say, well, that's great, but you must keep circumcision.
Actually, there's an example of that in the book of Acts. Timothy, who had a Jewish mother and a Greek father, he made him be circumcised. That's recorded in the book of Acts.
According to that interpretation, the accusation was false.
Right.
Okay. So where did Stephen lie?
So I'm not saying that Stephen lied.
Okay.
I'm saying there are at least 2 ways you can view this. One, that Stephen's lying when he's saying, no, we don't teach against the Torah. We're not teaching Jews to abandon circumcision. So either he's lying when he said that to his accusers, or he's not lying, and it was just a rumor going on about early followers of.
But how would you be lying?
I'm not saying that he's lying.
But you just told me that Stephen doesn't expect you to abandon circumcision.
Right. That's what, in his words. In his words. And I don't think there's a New Testament here. But basically, Stephen says that these rumors that I'm teaching these things to abandon circumcision in the Torah, these are false rumors.
Were they true or were they false?
I don't know. I'm just telling you what he said.
Okay.
All right. So this is just the New Testament report as to what he said.
Okay.
All right. Now, us, we can understand his words in two ways. Either he's being dishonest, he's afraid for his life, so he's just denying the rumor.
So we'll assume he's telling the truth.
Or we can assume that he is telling the truth.
In which case?
In which case, Christianity is contrary to what the early Christians were teaching.
Because the current Christians do in fact teach you.
Right. The current
Except for
Christians.
the Jews for Jesus, which are the religious Baptists.
Right.
And I hate to say.
Yeah, it's also dangerous for Jews as well. So, in any case, whichever way you view it, it's problematic for Christianity. Either this same individual, right?
Because what the new ones are effectively saying, they're either saying that Stephen was telling the truth, in which case they are liars, or they're saying that Stephen was a liar, in which case they are all liars.
Right.
Anyway, either way, it's not working out.
And then you have the same thing with Paul in the book of Acts chapter 21, where Paul comes to Jerusalem and a group of Christian, well, I say they're Christian, but they didn't call themselves that at the time, a group of followers of Jesus without the Christian assumptions. They get on to him and they say, Paul, we've heard that you're teaching the Jews outside of Israel to abandon the law of Moses, circumcision, and you're teaching against the temple. So Paul says that there's nothing in these things, that these things are unsubstantiated, but rather he opposed the Torah and circumcision, and in order to prove it, he pays for 3 people, helps them to make some sort of a vow, which is usually believed that he was helping them become Nazarites. And it goes on to explain that they went and made sacrifices in the temple.
Sounds like a Nazarite thing.
And then it talks about how they shaved themselves. He's doing this after he's what today they call a Christian. So I'm not trying to substantiate.
Saying that what they were then is definitely not what they are.
Right. Even if it was like.
Well, then why did you just do what they did then?
You're talking about Jews kicking them out of the synagogue?
No, why don't you just do what they did then?
Who, me? Because I'm totally unconvinced of the messiahship of Jesus.
So that's what really. So you're saying what you're saying is all this was just.
This is one of the first things
that threw you off a bit.
Right.
What convinced you that he was not the Messiah? I mean, I know why. I know why I don't. I mean, for me that's pretty clear. But what was it for you?
So, even before I noticed this, when I started getting deeper into the New Testament, I had read from the beginning of Genesis up to halfway in the book of Numbers. That was my first real introduction to the Bible.
I couldn't really figure why they called those names like Numbers, but then I realized that if you call it by Hebrew translation, it doesn't really work. Things.
Right.
That's
you could say the matters or the topics.
Things.
Right,
Chapter 5, 4:1. Things? Yeah, things.
That's true. So,
well, I think what I mean by Devarim is like Dibur, like words.
Yeah, but it also translates to things.
Right.